Did the universe have a beginning, and will it have an end? Chapter 1. The day the question woke up. On the morning the question woke up, I was standing on a hill older than my grandmother's stories, a chipped mug of coffee cooling in my hand. The city below still wore its streetlights like a necklace of small stars, and the first honest light of dawn was sliding under the clouds. Somewhere a dog barked, and somewhere a train stitched two neighborhoods together with a line of steel and time. The hill had a quiet that could steady a pulse. This is where I like to bring the questions I don't yet know how to love. Did the universe have a beginning? It sounds simple, almost like a children's riddle, but the more you turn it over, the heavier it becomes, like a stone that soaked up the meaning of a river for 1,000 years. We are the animals who ask, and that has made us both proud and haunted. Every culture has stood under the sky and tried to talk to it. Sometimes we call the sky God, sometimes nature, sometimes the void, sometimes space-time. It's like we keep inventing new names for the one thing that won't answer back, and then taking our turns translating the silence. The question feels bold. Did everything begin, and if so, how? But hidden inside it is a smaller, sharper thorn. If everything had a beginning, what was before the beginning? And if nothing was before it, what do we mean by before? The very word assumes a time that might not yet exist. So the question, mischievous thing that it is, rearranges our language. It pushes us down to bedrock, where even words teeter. When I was 8, I found it impossible to fall asleep unless I pictured the universe as a house I could walk through. I'd open doors. The door to my room, the door to the hallway, the door to the night wind slipping past the screen in a whisper threaded with pine. Then I'd open bigger doors, doors of years, doors of centuries, until one night I panicked and could not find a door big enough. Whatever I imagined, there was always something outside it, another room to walk into. There was no outermost door. That's when the dizziness would come, a swirl behind my eyes, and I'd clutch the blanket as if it were a rope tied to the mast of a ship on black water. We grow up, but the dizziness never fully leaves. Scientists learn the mathematics of dizziness. Philosophers write its grammar. And storytellers, well, we try to make a home for it using the furniture of narrative. So, let me tell you a story about beginnings. Better, let me tell you the many stories we've told, stitched into one, and how they led us to the first light, to equations that bite their tails, to a boundary that may have never been a wall at all. There was a time when the universe was a person, or a family, or a tribe. In some stories, the world hatches from an egg. In others, it's woven from a god's hair or hammered on a sky-smith's anvil. These stories are not naive. They are instructions the heart wrote for the mind before we had telescopes. They admit what we now often hide, that existence is personal, at least to us, and that beginning is something we measure in breaths and seasons. Every origin story is a mirror that reveals what a culture thinks birth looks like. Then came the philosophers. The Greeks, in particular, were stubborn about infinity. Aristotle imagined an eternal cosmos without a first moment. Change was constant, arranged in cycles, and time was the count of motion, never arriving at a day one. Infinity can be soothing that way. No awkward miracle, no out-of-nowhere bang, just light wheeling through the heavens like a patient clock. Centuries later, theologians argued about the dignity of creation. Some insisted on a creation ex nihilo, out of nothing. Others were more comfortable with an eternal God sustaining an eternal universe. The debates were not only about physics, of course. They were about the flavor of hope. A created universe implies intention. An eternal one can whisper of order without purpose or purpose without origin. Every side had its philosophers and poets. But we lacked something crucial. The sky was not yet a laboratory. Then came the 20th century with its thunder of trains and wars and equations drawn like music. Einstein taught us that time is not a stage the actors walk on, it's woven into the play itself. Space and time are one fabric, curved by matter and energy. Gravity is not an invisible tug, it's the way the stage slopes. You can fall by standing still. If time is part of the fabric, then asking what came before time becomes like asking what's north of the North Pole. A fair question, answered with a smile. Your map stops there, but maps can be redrawn. The new mathematics was intoxicating and dangerous. If the universe is expanding, as Einstein's equations permit, then yesterday it was smaller. Yesterday, smaller still. Run the film backward far enough, and everything begins to crowd together, heat up, whiten, and glow. Galaxies become mist. Protons and neutrons become a soup of quarks. Time and space become so tightly wound we can barely speak their names. It took a quiet astronomer with a patient telescope to confirm that the film was indeed running in reverse. Edwin Hubble, standing on a different hill beneath a different sky, noticed that the light from faraway galaxies was shifted toward the red stretched like a memory. They were not falling toward us but fleeing, the way spilled ink runs from the point of impact. His numbers were not perfect, but his direction was honest. Space itself is swelling, not like a bomb going off in a room, because there is no room. The explosion is the room. Imagine a loaf of raisin bread rising in the oven. The raisins are galaxies. The dough is space. As the loaf expands, every raisin sees every other raisin moving away, the distant ones faster. The raisins are not flying through the dough is inflating, and the raisins are passengers. Bake this image into your mind. It's a good one. It will feed us more than once. So perhaps there was a beginning, a moment when the loaf was not yet baked, when its molecules were singing too fast to set. Georges Lemaitre, a priest with the soul of an engineer, dared to suggest a primeval atom, an initial fireball. He wasn't imagining a tiny seed floating in emptiness. He was imagining a state of everything where location didn't yet mean what we think it means. He was telling a story that made physicists squirm, because stories that sound like creation have a way of trespassing into temples, and the Academy had its own liturgies. But the universe, like any good mystery, is loyal to its own plot. The evidence kept arriving. There was a relic light, a faint afterglow from the first trillion seconds, earlier, from the first 380,000 years after the beginning of the hot phase. 2 radio engineers stumbled on it by accident while chasing the hiss of pigeons' nests in a horn antenna. The hiss wouldn't go away, even after the pigeon problem did. It came from every direction, day or night. City or field, the sky was not quiet. It was singing in microwaves. The song matched the predictions of a universe that started hot, dense, and expanding, then cooled enough to let light travel unshackled. We call it the cosmic microwave background, the oldest photograph of light we have, a baby picture of the cosmos, as if God had forgotten to hide the negatives. with the afterglow mapped and the abundance of light elements measured: hydrogen, helium, a whisper of lithium. The scaffolding of the Big Bang grew solid. It was not a theory in peril, it was the floor of the house. The details kept being revised, yes, but the broad brushstrokes were too broad to miss. The universe had been younger, hotter, denser. Once upon a very real time, there was no galaxy because there were no stars. There were no atoms because the photons were too furious. There was no empty space because everything everywhere was a fury of something. I know what you want to ask because I want to ask it too. If the Big Bang is real, what banged? Where did the energy come from? What was there? If anything, before is a word that still has a place to stand. This is where our language falters, where the old dizziness flares, and we clutch the blanket again. Physicists answer in a spectrum of voices because reality is stingy with clarity at the thresholds where our mathematics begin to glow red. Yet the voices, when you listen carefully, are not chaos. They are a choir singing counterpoint. Let me introduce you to some of the melodies. One is simply this: the Big Bang is not a point in space exploding into surrounding emptiness. It is a boundary in the geometry of space-time itself. When you trace the curves backward, you don't find a marble of matter sitting in a void like a pearl in velvet. You find that our equations lead us to a place where they stop making physical sense. We call that a singularity, not because it's magical, but because it's where our descriptions stop and reality shrugs. Beyond here, dragons, the old maps warned, not because dragons live there, but because the mapmaker hadn't been. Another melody is more subtle. Perhaps there was no singular point, only a phase, an era, when the fabric of space was dominated by an energy that made it inflate astonishingly fast, smoothing wrinkles the way a hot iron smooths a shirt. This is inflation, a wildly successful idea because it explains why the universe looks nearly the same in all directions and why its baby picture has just the right freckles of density to grow galaxies. In this tune, the bang is not a bang, it's a stretch. And the stretch, intriguingly, might not be a one-time miracle. In some versions, it never ends. It rolls like a wave, creating bubble-like regions where inflation stops and ordinary space is born. Each bubble could be a universe. We live in one of them, puzzled and proud, thinking we are everything because we are everything we can see. Before inflation, maybe quantum gravity, a regime where space and time are not continuous fields but something grainy and relational, like a woven cloth when you bring a magnifying glass to the threads. Some sages speak of loop quantum cosmology, where a prior contracting universe bounces into expansion, avoiding a true singularity. Others offer a no-boundary proposal, where time near the beginning behaves like space so that the universe is finite but without edge, like the surface of the earth has no place where it begins, though there is no earth beyond the earth. In that view, the beginning is more like a rounding off of geometry than the strike of a match. Still others entertain the idea of a past eternal inflation, where any attempt to find a first moment simply turns up an older valley in a landscape of fields. Yet even there, a theorem whispers that eternities are trickier than they look. Under certain plausible conditions, even inflation has to have some sort of beginning, if not everywhere. Then, somewhere along any given path you trace backward, our maps tangle, and it is tempting to declare a winner. But science does not crown kings. It builds ladders and invites you to climb until the ladder shakes. I can hear your impatience, and it's good. Curiosity without a little fire goes nowhere. So let me say something practical. Wherever the line of beginning falls sharp or rounded, singular or softly stitched, our universe has a history that we have measured, and it is not shy. The light in your lamp is made by stars, and those stars were born in the skeletons of galaxies, and those galaxies grew from the foam of quantum fluctuations inflated to cosmic size. Time's arrow points from smooth to clumpy, from hot to cool, from potential to structure. The reason your morning coffee grows cold is the same reason the universe can tell time. Entropy increases, the deck shuffles. A beginning, in this sense, is not a moment only. It is a movement. Picture the first bars of a symphony. You could mark the exact instant the conductor lifted the baton, but the music is not the baton. The music is the unfolding of possibilities written in a key. The universe is written in a key, too, a handful of parameters, a familiarity with symmetry, laws that hold even when everything else changes its clothes. The deep magic is that there are laws at all. The deeper magic is that we can write them down, however imperfectly. But you came here for a story, not only for equations. So let me give you faces. Imagine 3 human beings, each in their own century, standing on 3 separate hills, thinking the same thought in different languages. The first is Aristotle, a tunic catching the sea wind, eyes flashing with the confidence of circular motions and unmoved movers. He thinks eternity is elegant and time is the measure of movement, and he wonders whether it insults the heavens to pin them to a birthday. The second is Lemaitre, collar snug against a Belgian morning, taking the bus to the observatory with a mind full of curves. He sees the primeval atom not as a grenade, but as a beginning of space itself, and he carries in his pocket the humility of a man who prays and calculates with the same hands. The third is a graduate student in a hoodie on a rooftop, breathing in the smell of rain on hot tar, scrolling through a map of the cosmic microwave background on a cracked phone. She stares at the lumpy portrait of the universe's baby skin and feels something like awe pass over her bones. She thinks it really happened, not just to other people, but to me. I am the descendant of hydrogen and time. If the universe had a beginning, then you and I are in a narrative with a first page. That page was not written in ink, nor by a clock that anyone wound, but it was written if written can mean the lawful flowering of what could be. And there is tenderness in that idea, even if it frightens us, because beginnings are where hopes are born. If there was a beginning, then there can be meaning, not imposed from outside like a stamp on wax, but grown from within like a tree claims light. There are criticisms. Some say the Big Bang is a story we've fallen in love with because it flatters our appetite for drama. If you start with a bang, you get to live in a narrative that promises arcs. But they mistake the poetry for the proof. The proof is in the sky. The afterglow is as real as your heartbeat. The abundance of helium is not a metaphor. The recession of galaxies is not an allegory you tell kids to help them fall asleep. The poetry comes later, when we try to hold all this in our chest without bursting. And yet, responsibility demands we keep a watchful mind. The words beginning and cause carry baggage heavier than the centuries. A beginning need not be caused in the way a glass shattering is caused by a stone. At the edge of space-time, cause and effect are local customs, They may be revised or replaced by a deeper order where before is not admitted as a legal term. This is not a loophole to smuggle in mystery. It is a reminder that mystery owed us nothing, and yet keeps paying. Here's a humbler way to say it. There's an old parable about a farmer who plants a seed and then sleeps and rises, and the seed sprouts he knows not how. The farmer does not stop planting because he lacks a PhD in botany. He lives in the knowledge that doing honest work within mystery yields fruit. The cosmologist is a farmer of light. She plants equations, sleeps, rises, tests, adjusts, and the universe sprouts models, some that wither, some that bear fruit, and on a good year, a new telescope blooms. So, did the universe have a beginning? The honest answer today is this. Every road we have followed into the fog points to a hot, dense, early phase from which all structure grew, a phase that, in our best tested models, is reached in finite proper time when you trace your history backward. Whether that phase sits at a hard wall, a true beginning, or at a rounded corner, a bounce, a no boundary, a patch of geometry where time behaves differently, is a question still sleeping with one eye open. It may never close that eye for us. Or maybe tomorrow a young mind on a rooftop will write an equation in chalk that bends the fog away like sunlight peering through the blind. I don't think the meaning of our lives hangs on the difference. I think the dignity is in the asking. If the universe began, we are children of a first light. If it did not, we are children of an infinity that keeps making room. In both, gratitude fits. But our question has two wings, and we have only stretched one. To ask whether the universe had a beginning is to ask, almost in the same breath, whether it will have an end, and there too the stories multiply. Some endings are slow as an exhale, a long cooling into night. Some are violent, a tearing of space itself like a sail in a storm. Some are relational. We fade not because the lights go out, but because the distances grow so great that no shout can cross them, and silence is a more final thing than darkness. Some are subtle, a false vacuum tripping into a truer one, erasing everything we thought was solid with a new definition of solid. And if beginnings are birth, endings are the art of letting go. The universe keeps rehearsing both in the small. Stars flare and die, galaxies collide, atoms decay, and yet the laws endure. What will the page after the last page look like? Will there be a last page? And if so, who will be there to see the cover close? On the hill, the sunlight has finally climbed the last rung and spills over my shoes. The city puts on its diurnal face, the necklace of lights unclasped and stored for night. I finish my coffee. The question is awake, and so am I. I want you to come with me to the edge of time again, but this time we won't look backward. We'll lean forward, toes at the curb of the future, and listen for how the story might end. If there was a beginning, the sky remembers it as warmth. If there will be an end, the sky will carry that rumor too. In the fainting of starlight, in the whisper of expansion, in the arithmetic of decay. We will read those rumors like saints read omens, not to tremble, but to understand. You have been patient with the dizziness. Bring it with you. We will need it where we're going. Chapter 2. How the story might end. The night after the question woke up, I walked to the river where the city keeps its moonlight. The water carried the lights of apartments and taxis, the way a throat carries a song, and every ripple translated the skyline into a trembling script. If the first chapter of our inquiry asked where the story begins, the second chapter asks something ruder and harder to look at. How does the story end, and does a story need an audience to end at all? I sat on the last bench before the footbridge and thought of endings I have known. The quiet endings, a library closing bell, the last spoonful of soup, a friend moving away. The louder endings, a slammed door, a thunderstorm cracking open the ceiling, the final curve of a laugh that leaves you bereft as soon as it's finished. The universe is a library with no single bell, a storm whose thunder lasts billions of years per syllable. When we say the end, we are borrowing a small word for a large thing, but we are allowed to borrow. The cosmos has lent us so much already. There are 4 grand finales the physicists keep in their pockets, 4 masks the future wears when it looks in the mirror. They have Greek names and Latin habits, but their bones are stories. We will walk through them one by one. Along the way, we will find a 5th ending, too quieter than the rest, a sort of moral that may be the only one we can truthfully keep. The first ending is heat, not the kind that warms your hands over a sidewalk grate, but the kind that steals structure the way time steals names. Once, the universe was hot and uniform. Then gravity, like a gossip with good intentions, turned uniform into clumpy. Gas clouds fell into one another's arms, stars lit, galaxies whirled, planets accreted like stubborn cookies. Entropy, our stern bookkeeper of disorder, went up, because the overall number of ways the universe could arrange itself while honoring its conservation laws kept increasing. Useful energy was spent growing structure we can love. Waste energy drifted into emptiness as background murmur. A cosmic heat death is the patient continuation of this trend into its bleak conclusion. Stars exhaust their hydrogen and then the distinguished fuels that follow. Their ashes become white dwarfs, neutron stars, black holes. New stars grow rarer as gas is locked away in remnants or blown into intergalactic cold. The night sky, millions and then trillions of years from now, thins its jewelry until there are rings with no fingers, necklaces with no necks. Fusion, that thrilling book club where nuclei swap stories and emerge with heavier hearts, becomes a rumor. Without fuels to ignite, there is no new starlight. If protons decay, a question we have not yet settled, and may not for long times, the last stubborn chunks of matter would, over eons spread beyond patience, dissolve into radiation and lighter particles. Even if protons do not decay, gravitational dance will fling most stars from their galaxies. Those left will fall into central black holes. In a classical sketch, black holes sit in the final pews like monks who have taken a vow of silence. But quantum mechanics whispers that nothing is perfectly quiet. Black holes should glow, faintly, like ice evaporating without melting, releasing their hoard through a process that cares about horizons and the uncertainty of the vacuum. The famous evaporation that a shy mind named Hawking admitted with the embarrassment of a genius caught telling a joke that turns out to be true. If this is right, then the last actors on the last stage evaporate themselves into a vast, thin bath of low-energy photons and neutrinos, expanding into a space that grows like a yawn. No gradients to run engines on, no clumps to sculpt, no matches to strike. Temperature slides toward a nearly uniform chill that doesn't freeze because there is nothing left to freeze. The end is not a bang, it's a hush. Heat death is a kind phrase for a quiet that blossoms into everywhere. This ending is not dramatic enough for some taste buds. It lacks a cliff, a blade, a curtain, but sit with it, and you will hear a different music. The kindness of exhaustions that have served their purpose. The candles burned, the rooms were bright a while. The cosmos spent itself yielding galaxies and planet songs, and people who could ask why it bothered. And that may be the most extravagant use of energy imaginable. A heat death is not a failure. It's the bill paid for an exuberant feast. The second ending sells tickets under a different marquee, the Big Crunch. This is the return to sender finale, the one where expansion patient since the first breath slows, stalls, and reverses under gravity's persuasion, where the raisin loaf we baked for the beginning surrenders its rise and collapses back toward dough. In this story, the universe is a pendulum without a string, swinging on its own geometry, sweeping from explosion to implosion like a chest that must exhale what it inhaled. Once, this was the fashionable coat in the cosmologist's closet. It fit a world where matter and radiation were enough to close space like a fist. It gratified a longing for symmetry beginnings that echo in endings. Some even dared to hope for cycles, a universe that crunches to a point and then bounces to another bang, like a heart pumping through epochs, every era spitting out stars and poets anew. In those models, universes breed universes, and entropy's accounting tricks must be cunning indeed to keep the books from overflowing. But observations play bouncer to theory's nightlife. When we measure how fast galaxies recede, how the baby picture of the microwaves blossoms into the adult portrait of galaxies, and how supernovae flicker across cosmological distances, we find not deceleration but acceleration, something not atoms, not light, not neutrinos, not anything we can bottle seems to be pushing space to expand faster the more it expands. It is as if emptiness had a pressure, a springiness that does not thin as it stretches. We gave it a placeholder name, dark energy, a moniker as honest as a shrug. In a universe where dark energy behaves like a cosmological constant, a fixed energy density of the vacuum, the crunch falls out of fashion. There isn't enough tug to reverse the push. The pendulum, it seems, has lost its hinge. The mouth that inhaled does not exhale. The Big Crunch becomes a perhaps faint in the hall where the likely have seats on the aisle. Still, we keep its coat in the closet because even a rejected ending can teach us about the tailoring. Some theories of quantum gravity and cyclic cosmologies still plant seasons of collapse and rebirth on their calendars. They need a physics that can slalom through singularities and bound entropy between cycles. Maybe time itself, near the turnaround, changes rules the way traffic laws make exceptions for ambulances. But today's sky votes for continued expansion. Votes can change, for now, the ballot is clear enough to read. The third ending is a more flamboyant cousin of the second, the Big Rip. If the vacuum's pressure is not just constant but grows more violent with time, if the push gets pushier, then expansion can end not in a chilling drift, but in a shredding. Gravity holds galaxies together. Orbital velocities hold planets to stars. Molecular bonds hold your body to itself. Quarks huddle in protons like secrets kept in basements. A sufficiently aggressive dark energy would, on a schedule as meticulous as it is cascading, pry apart each of these holdings. First, galaxy clusters would come unglued, then galaxies, then solar systems, then planets, then the atoms in your coffee cup, then the coffee itself, then the rules that let coffee be a noun. The Big Rip reads like cosmic horror, but it is a pedigree of arithmetic, not nightmare. Its trigger is a kind of dark energy called phantom, with an equation of state more negative than the quiet cosmological constant. If that sentence feels like ice in a teacup, hear instead the metaphor in a phantom regime. The elasticity of emptiness becomes ambitious. It wants to be more than it is. It grows with expansion in a way that compounds its own growth, exponentials on exponentials, until it drowns structure at every scale. Do we live in such a universe? The best we can say today is that nothing we have measured demands it. The acceleration seems stable enough to be consistent with a constant. The error bars, those little fences around our ignorance, still leave room for mischief, but not much. The Rip remains a lurid poster, not the show we have tickets to. If you are glad, I don't blame you. I prefer the gentle sorrow of heat death to the violent pity of dissolution. But the cosmos does not check my preferences. It simply checks its parameters against what is. We keep watching, because the plot may yet throw a twist, and because staying for the credits is good manners. The fourth ending is not about expansion speeds or heat budgets. It is an ambush in the basement of reality, vacuum decay. Quantum field theory, the grammar of the fields that fill space and manifest as particles when you poke them, teaches that what we call vacuum is not empty. It is the lowest energy state available to the fields. But what if it is only a local minimum, a valley that feels like the bottom because the mountains nearby are taller? Somewhere else in field space, a landscape more real than any farm, a lower valley might exist. Most of the time, the universe cannot get there because the mountain between is too high to climb. But quantum mechanics permits tunneling, a trick where, without climbing, you simply appear on the other side, the way a thought appears in the middle of a sentence without knocking. If our vacuum is metastable, a long-lived imposter rather than a true ground state, then in some unimaginably empty region, a bubble of true vacuum could nucleate, small as a particle, but with a pressure difference that commands expansion at nearly the speed of light. The bubble wall would be a front where the rules change. Inside, a new vacuum with altered constants, altered particle masses, perhaps no chemistry, perhaps no atoms, perhaps a physics where light does not curve or curves too much. Outside, reality as we know it. The wall would not radiate a warning. It would be a horizon, the way death is a horizon, a place beyond which our existing meanings do not hold. This story sounds like apocalypse not because it is likely, but because it is clean. There is no suffering beyond a microsecond. There is only replacement. It is, as endings go, the mercy of instant amnesia. Should we worry? Not as citizens of a city that has rent and laughter and bread to buy. As theorists, we worry to satisfy our desire to know if the vacuum is honest. We probe the Higgs field. We write papers that calculate tunneling rates. We measure the sky's whisper for hints of new fields with new plots. So far, the evidence keeps us in our valley. If the bubble is coming, it does not send postcards. 4 endings: cooling, crunching, ripping, tunneling. The sky, with its current temperament, prefers the cool. A universe dominated by a constant dark energy drifts into a de-sitter phase, a kind of ever-expanding, ever-chilly exile, where horizons carve an ultimate neighborhood. Beyond a certain distance, acceleration outruns any signal. The observable universe shrinks in meaning even as space grows in size. Galaxies slip past our horizon like ships leaving a fog bank, their lights red-shifted into invisibility. The night becomes local. The cosmic microwave background, our baby photo, cools and lengthens its wavelength until the universe itself forgets its infancy. If any future astronomers ride that far unlikely, as their atoms would be in short supply, they would live in a sky that tells them a lie, that their island of stars is all there is and always has been. Perhaps this matters less than our pride thinks. The value of truth is not undermined by the scarcity of witnesses. Still, the thought is sobering. We live at a time when the universe announces its own origins in the sky. This is a gift the future may not enjoy. The horizon is a time machine, and its dial is set to now. Another horizon stands behind the cosmic one, the black holes. In the long afternoon of a heat-death universe, black holes do most of the interesting work. They eat what is left to eat. Then, over fantastically long epochs, they whisper their mass away as radiation. When the biggest of them finally fades, the universe crosses a threshold. There are no books left, only letters, no letters, only an alphabet dissolved into static. The geometry of space settles into a quiet that is not absolute but might as well be. Time continues, so far as time is a tally of change, but its content becomes a meditation so sparse that the monk and the monastery are indistinguishable. A question tugs the sleeve of anyone who follows this path too far. What about fluctuations? In a universe that asymptotes to a stable de Sitter vacuum, random quantum jiggles could, with unfathomably low probabilities, assemble temporary pockets of low entropy, brief islands of structure, rising like mirages in the desert of thermal equilibrium. If one of those fluctuations assembles a brain with false memories, we give it a cartoonish name, a Boltzmann brain. It is a reductio, the cosmos whispers back to us. Do you prefer that meaningless minds outnumber meaningful histories? If not, perhaps your cosmology needs a caveat. Many physicists would prefer a universe where the ordinary path to minds, stars, planets, life dominates, not the path where freak brains pop out of noise and mistake themselves for stories. How to enforce that preference without praying to taste is an ongoing debate. Endings infect beginnings with their demands. We have wandered a fair bit from our bench by the river. Let's return, for the sake of courage. The water has changed. A barge has cut its signature through the surface. The ripples argue with each other and then agree on stillness. I think of the end not as a guillotine but as a boundary condition, the way the edges of a violin set constraints that make music possible. Future conditions, even unknowable ones, can cast shadows into the present. The arrow of time is a composite of arrows. The expansion of the universe, the growth of entropy, the blooming and senescence of stars, the simple comfort of coffee cooling on a countertop. Our human arrows are nested in these larger shafts. We are arrows of arrows. All this talk of ends is cowardice. If we avoid the question haunting the hallway, what does any of it mean for us? If the universe does not promise an eternal playground, if heat death wins the vote and no cycles rescue us, no deities reach down with new rules, no clever wormholes let us outrun the glue of expansion, does this subtract from our purposes? Does the finitude of structure embezzle the significance of what happens while the lights are on? I do not think so. The terminal nature of starlight has always been a feature, not a bug, of meaning. Scarcity is the mother of attention, An eternal noon would bleach the world of shadows, but the late hour gives color back. Music is not injured by its duration. The last note does not betray the first. On the contrary, endings sharpen beginnings, and the knowledge that we are finite curls gratitude up out of the soil. Imagine a universe without ends, a static eternity where nothing changes and nothing can. It is a heaven that resembles a prison. We, who are made of events, would starve there. Science, too, thrives not on immortality, but on harvest. Every measurement is made within a span. Every theory is an approximation that keeps the lights on until the bulb burns brighter. To learn that the universe may go dark, that horizons will close and candlewicks will fail, is to be reminded that understanding is for now, which makes it more precious, not less. But there is a subtler consolation, if consolation is even the right vocation here. When we speak about heat death, this leveling of differences into a few large samenesses, we are also speaking about a kind of democratic completion. Every particle gets its say. None dominates the conversation. The universe refuses to become a tyrant's monument. It refuses also to become our mirror. It goes where its equations take it, and our role is to love what can be loved while it can be loved. Parents and children and books and stone bridges and the smell of rain on the first day of spring. The end does not invalidate these. It contextualizes them. It places them in a phrase with commas and a period. Periods do not insult sentences, they complete them. Perhaps you feel, as I do, that cosmology often sounds like theology played on different instruments. The theologian and the cosmologist both ask the sky to explain itself. Both work with traces and constraints. Both are tempted to smuggle their hopes into their proofs. Both are chastened by an evidence that is often more beautiful than their hopes deserve. That is why I try, in this telling, to keep the rhetoric honest. The likely future is cool down, long and lonelier than words can fairly stitch. The dramatic futures are not completely banished, but their probability is not a tide that reaches our feet. The apocalyptic bubble of vacuum decay is possible in the way a coin tossed every second might, after an astronomically long run of tails, land on its edge. Possible is not the same as scheduled. And yet the last ending, the one I promised beyond the four, refuses to live in physics alone. It is the end we make by how we live while the laws keep house. We end a friendship by neglect. We end a poem by giving it too many adjectives. We end a day by confusing busyness with meaning. But we can end with craft, too. We can end a meal by passing the last bread to someone else. We can end a quarrel with an apology. We can end a book with a sentence that glows for a while after the eyes close. If the cosmos is the book that contains us, we are nevertheless authors of paragraphs within it. Our control is embarrassingly local, but it is control. The scale mismatch between our agency and the sky's indifference is not a joke. It is the premise of a particular kind of heroism. So, did the universe have a beginning, and will it have an end? The first chapter told you what our best maps say about the beginning. A hot, dense origin, or the soft geometry of a no boundary, or the rebound of a bounce followed by expansion and the seeding of structure. The second chapter tells you what our best skies say about the end. Continued expansion, horizons, exhaustion, and the slow release of all names into background. The answers are not the kind that satisfy the child in us who wants a door we can knock on and a voice that says, "Come in." They are, however, honest. And honesty, in a universe like ours, is a form of love. Before I left the river, a breeze slid under the bridge and lifted a sheet of newspaper into the air. It fluttered, stumbled, snagged on a branch, then loosened and sailed on. Somewhere, people were laughing, not because they had solved anything, but because solving was not required to enjoy the evening. The moon was up, bearing its old scars like medals. The city performed its symphony of small endings, last trains, last glasses, last emails sent with too little thought. I stood and put my hands in my pockets, the way a person does when words have run out. Here is where our book ends. If you were hoping for fireworks, I can only offer you fireflies, smaller lights, closer to hand, arranged by chance and will into dances that mean more than they have any right to. The universe will do what it will. We will do what we must, and sometimes what we can. Between these, meaning grows like a weed through concrete, uninvited, unstoppable, stubbornly green. When the question woke up, it woke us with it. We answered as far as the morning allowed. We found that beginning and end are not cages but contours, and that living inside them can be not only bearable but beautiful. If the cosmos started in light and will end in night, then we are the candles in between. Hold one up, look around, see who else is holding one too.